we good if I say that now? Councilman Higginson, we'd like to test test if we can hear you. Do you mind speaking?
Speaking, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, sounds good. We can hear you.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Is it loud and obnoxious?
Nope. It's
Then
just.
something must be wrong.
Thank you. That's great. We can get started? Okay. Welcome to our work session, Tuesday, November 12th for the Bountiful City Council. And we will be having a work session to discuss gravel parking standards. Just as a reminder, in our work sessions, we don't have any official votes. So we'll be discussing this idea and talking about potential changes or what council feels about these standards. But we are not making any final decisions during this work session. So it is not a public hearing, but if anyone from the public that is here would like to say something regarding this standard that we're evaluating, then at 7 o'clock when our regular city council meeting starts, there's a public comment period where you can speak for 2 minutes and weigh in with anything you would like to share at that time. So then that's something that we'll definitely be able to take into consideration since we don't make any final decisions during this work session, if that makes sense. So we will begin by asking Mr. Francisco Astorga, our planning director, to give us an overview, and then we'll just dive into the discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity. As we get going, I wanted to just clarify one quick item. Starting on page 10 through 15, these are the relevant code sections found in the land use code. We decided to keep every section. We didn't want to give you small pieces, so we provided to you the entire section. And the highlights is just a simple focus indicating as to why we've made the decisions that we've made so far. This is not a typical code amendment where we're striking out words, we're striking out principles, and we're adding different items. We're not there yet. We haven't received your direction to do that. So I just wanted to let you know that these are all relevant sections ranging from required lot coverages, parking, loading, and access, specific definitions. We did not include all 300 definitions that don't have anything to do with the topic. General parking areas, access requirements, general provisions that's within the landscaping section, and then finally clear view area, and then landscaping in the residential zone. So I just wanted to clarify that this is not a text amendment of any kind. With that said, we've been directed to have this exploratory, I would say, work session discussion regarding paved parking surfaces. Both the planning department and the city engineer's office, we have always interpreted that paved parking needs to be asphalt, concrete, and similar materials. And some of the key words as highlighted in that text is paved. And we could expand on that. Given the staff report that we have produced and knowing that you have all read it, I just want to make sure that we have the end goal in mind. In that, based on our analysis, we believe that we could, and this is written on page 9, we could use gravel as a suitable material for parking areas. If we were to do that, we do need to have some considerations. We would advise you that we would consider exactly what we wrote on page 9. We would consider that landscaping, driveways, and gravel parking areas should be treated differently in the way that we have different requirements throughout the code. We would add that gravel could continue to be used for landscaping. This would be xeriscaping. And we would also note that if that were the case, it shouldn't be a dual use. It shouldn't be a landscaping with shrubs and a possible parking area. It should be either or. Furthermore, we feel that gravel should not be allowed as a driveway material, and we're going to expand, and we do that at the beginning of the staff report as to why we have those reasons. We also find that parking should remain prohibited within clear view areas. It would defeat the purpose if then we were able to place a vehicle in an area that's supposed to be free and clear of any obstructions. And finally, gravel should not be connected directly with the street, sidewalk, or gutter storm drain. And that's due to the material issues that it could have on our right-of-way system. With that said, we did, also on the staff report, this would be on the bottom of page 8, top of page 9, we have more of a menu of exploratory items that we could find. We could come back with additional language in the future should council request that change, which we could do nothing and keep the code as is. We could consider gravel parking areas within the rear yard area. We could consider it behind the main dwelling. We could consider it at the front yard setback area, so the same location, ideally where the house is located, or we could have some sort of additional setback for gravel parking areas at 10 feet. If you see these, if you recognize these 5 choices, it kind of starts with no gravel parking area to more of a menu, a spectrum of different areas where we could. With that said, I'd like to briefly turn the time over to my cohort over there, the city engineer, as he is ready to expand on the material review. And this is based on the staff report that we produced for you tonight.
Thanks, Francisco. I just want to preface my remarks by saying I look forward to the discussion and understanding what the council's thoughts are about this subject. It's pretty important, and I think it's something that we really need to take a very close look at as we consider some action. Having built my own home in kind of a rural area at times, I recognize that the impact of being able to use gravel for some parking has some definite advantages. And I won't say that I gave you a comprehensive list, but I thought that the 3 or 4 items that I gave you were practical and very useful for this discussion. That gravel does have some serious advantages. You know, that being said, like all things, it also has a few disadvantages, and we wanted to quantify from the engineering department the things that we felt were most important about the discussion from our perspective. And so that's why I've listed these 4 items. The first of which is that, yeah, gravel is good, but it's not something that you can entirely just forget. It does take a little bit of work. Now, maybe not as much as mowing your lawn or weeding your flower bed, but there is some activity that's required to keep it presentable and somewhat useful. So that was really the basis of our comments. Over the last few years, we have had several, I don't know how else to call them other than incidents, where for whatever reason, we have had people get hurt on the sidewalks. Now, whether that's a broken piece of sidewalk or a hole that's been left or a raised section from a tree or whatever, there are hazards on the sidewalk. And one of our primary concerns is that gravel that is right against the sidewalk where the pedestrians are presents a hazard for pedestrians, you know, kids on scooters or skateboards or whatever. And we would certainly like to minimize liability for us as the city and also for adjacent homeowners. So that became primary concern number 1. The second concern we identified comes from our stormwater ordinance, where gravel is specifically listed as a source, a potential source of contamination. Now, if it comes from an area that's heavily used and maybe it has some residual oil or something like that on it, that's pretty easy to understand. But Also, from a maintenance perspective, it can become an issue when in larger quantities, it affects the performance of our storm drain system. Our third concern is that there's also the law of unintended consequences. And that is sometimes you see where people have expanded their parking next to their driveway, and that's encouraged them to use parts of the street right-of-way that aren't really intended for vehicular traffic to cross improvements like sidewalk, which really aren't built for any additional load. So it damages the sidewalk, presents another hazard for pedestrians, and would be something we would want to consider in this discussion. I know there has been some additional discussion about the city's use of gravel in some places. During the design of the Bountiful Town Square, it was a calculated decision to use what we call, oh gosh, I lost the word, decomposed granite as a surface to park food trucks on, knowing that food trucks can sometimes be messy. You know, they come with a fryer or a generator, and sometimes when you fuel those up, you spill a little bit, and we wanted those areas to be easily maintained and presentable. And so the use of a crushed stone in that area was very calculated. And I think that it served us well, and I think it serves as a good example that gravel can be used successfully in the right spot. In my very own neighborhood at home, I have some neighbors who use gravel, and just for the audience, I don't happen to live in Bountiful, I live in Syracuse. But I have some neighbors who have used a lot of gravel in front of their driveways. And the thing I've noticed about it is their gravel is very round, and it is perpetually everywhere. It doesn't stay where it was intended. It's across the sidewalk, it's out in the street, it's out in the gutter, it's down in the storm drain. So this is another good example of where the type of material that's used makes a big difference in how it behaves. Sands and round gravels, we think would be probably less appropriate for use as a parking area. But, you know, a nice crushed, I'm going to say the term in the industry is non-uniform. It means that there's a broad distribution of particle sizes, so it binds together. Those kinds of things tend to stay in place better than just one size of aggregate. Francisco, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, I think it would be a good time to see if there's any questions regarding the material review that has been assessed by the city engineer's office. And I would add that for all those reasons, which was not meant to be completely comprehensive, but we do believe that those have been the reasons why the city has not included gravel as an acceptable material for either a driveway or a parking area, for all the reasons that Mr. Cheney has just indicated. So we would love to take a break and see if we have any questions so far before we get into more of the alternatives that we might have and explaining of other requirements that are interrelated.
Okay, yes. Any questions so far, council?
Mayor, could I ask a question?
Sure.
First, I want to say that I recognize that this potential change really does touch a lot of sections of code, and it's a complicated thing, and I really appreciate staff putting as much work into this preparation for this issue as they have. I'm curious, I didn't see a definitive answer in the material of whether or not a gravel parking area would count against the impervious percentage of a person's lot, or if it would be treated as other landscaping as being water pervious.
Yeah, I can take that question, Mayor. We haven't provided any specific type of code changes, so that's why we didn't answer the question. But if you look on page 11, that's where we put the definition, definition 142. A gravel parking area would not count as impervious material based on its definition. And I guess,
No.
so I could,
Thank you for that. As we proceed forward with this issue, I also think that it would be well, if it's not defined in other sections of code, what the allowable height of any obstruction is in a clear view zone or a clear view area. And
yes,
I completely agree with staff's recommendations on maintaining clear view areas, including in potentially newly generated clear view areas with an additional driveway. I love the separation from public areas that staff has also given as a potential solution. So anyway, I'll be quiet and let you explain, Mr. Astorga.
sure thing. The clearance area was included. It just wasn't highlighted. It's on page 14 where it separates the intersection Clearview area, and that's item C, as I'm pointing out here. And then what it applies to what we're reviewing today is what we call the driveway Clearview area, which is established on the bottom of page 14 in item D. And then the clearances is item 1 through 6, where it talks about fences that are open style, cannot be more than 4 feet, and it talks about some trees and other types of obstructions that can remain within that Clearview area. Does that address your question, Councilman Higginson?
It does very well. Thank you.
Thank you. At this, we still have more to get into, but at this point, does the council have any other questions?
I have a question for our staff. We've seen some of our residents elect to xeriscape park strips. And it seems that a lot are not following our landscape ordinance. They're just completely gravel and not including any of the plants or trees that are required to still exist in that xeriscaping. If we were to make any of the suggested changes, do we think that this would increase your enforcement and complaint burden, given that you would potentially be introducing this new complication of whether perhaps they've selected the right type of irregular shaped gravel, and whether they're adhering to the clear view and whether they're maintaining proper separation. I mean, there's a lot to potentially considering doing this right when it feels like we're having trouble as a community with even doing park strips in a xeriscape fashion with gravel correctly.
Sure. You are correct in that there's a plethora of park strip that do not comply with our xeriscape ordinance. And as council's well aware, we do code enforcement, we are complaint-based. Whenever you add another regulation, and as Councilman Higginson indicated, which is already intertwined and complicated already, whenever you add another one, it adds more work. It potentially adds more work to my office. I have had an opportunity to do a few code enforcement cases this fall season as I was down a person, and we divided up the work, and I got to work myself on a street Clearview area complaint that I received from a neighbor. So they do come in. And yeah, just to answer your question, it would definitely add, not definitely, but it would add more to our workload. Any complication in the code will always add to it.
May I follow up with a question, Mayor? Okay, thank you. I think I have a question, though. One of the reasons I was very interested in seeing this come to a work session tonight is that I think our code is currently vague. It says that you can use asphalt, concrete, or similar materials. And it's that vague statement of similar materials that I think is not giving our residents the best information. In fact, it's obscuring the information from our residents. And if we know, and if our residents then know that gravel is allowed, I think that's helpful. And it would behoove us then to just say, we say it in our landscaping ordinance. We had many meetings here when we were redoing our landscaping ordinance where we talked about what size, what type. Who remembers the lava rock conversation? I mean, and we had those conversations and then put out that information. Now, I think we could go, unfortunately, we could go all up and down the code and different land use ordinances that are in the code that are being violated because, and, you know, I don't think because there are violations on the landscaping and certain park strips, ergo, that means people will violate this to any, if we were to change to any greater degree. I think what I am excited about is the opportunity here to direct staff or have the discussion and see if we want to direct staff to give more clear language in the code. I think more clear language is always good. And to me, it seems like that could actually, is it possible, Francisco, that that could indeed reduce work because the clarity would then be in the code instead of the vague, unknowable terminology of similar materials.
Yeah, complete agreement. If council chose not to do anything and continue the way that we have been working, it would be very wise to say gravel is not permitted. We completely agree with that.
What other discussion points do you feel are necessary as we move forward in considering if we want to do A, B, C, or none of the above?
Sure.
I just wanted to add, I think there's a lot of ordinances that I'm becoming more aware of. But I think a lot of times homeowners don't go to our site first to even know if it's an ordinance to begin with. And so they do that because it's cost effective. They have a need to put something additional on their property for additional cars, for teenagers, trailers, whatever. And then because we are complaint-based, it doesn't become a problem until someone complains about it. So whatever we do as an adjustment on this, I think is more to give you the ability to help mitigate the complaint now and help educate. Because I don't know how, if by making these changes, all of a sudden our residents are gonna be like, oh, I guess I need to go talk to the city first before I do it. I think you'll still have people do this because they just don't check the site. And so then how do we make it very clear that doesn't make them so frustrated with the city that now we're now coming after them to correct something that they've invested time and money in, but you know, it's their neighbor complains. So whatever we do, I think should be in a way that lets us work with the resident on doing something what they just didn't know. Ignorance was bliss in their mind. So if they use gravel, then we need to be able to explain why gravel wasn't the right choice or what the new material should be. Or if we say gravel's there, then how do we mitigate it so it doesn't get onto the streets and on the sidewalk and that other stuff?
So that's a good lead-in. What are some potential options that you think we should consider?
Yeah, so as we go through this, and this is outlined in the staff report, we're going to pick it up on page 5. There are a lot of driveway regulations. And we did not throw everything, but we decided to incorporate the ones that makes more sense in your ability to be able to legislate, should that be needed. And the exhibit in front of you on page 6, which is 14.4.1, is not an exhibit that I created. This is already found in the code. And the reason why we felt this was important for you to know is about this landscaping area. The code doesn't say, it just refers to it. It's using a graphic as regulation. And as you see here, it's got a minimum landscape requirement of 5 by 5, and then on the adjoining property line is 10 feet. When you look at that, and you know that the maximum driveway width is 30 feet, you would think, the first thing you'd think is it's more of an aesthetic regulation. That the city, way back when, decided that we didn't want driveways side by side, in that potentially could be a 60-foot perceived driveway. And you would say, oh, okay, they did it to break it up. But as you take a deeper dive in the code, you find out that it coincides with our clear view area requirement, in that the code treats it as a life safety regulation. It's not it's not opinion. It's literally what my code says regarding that clear view area. And I hope that this blue exhibit, that I wasn't quite able to overlay it over the buffering, I hope it makes sense. I chose to draw it this way because it was too many conflicts with the green and the blue. Do we understand what I'm trying to represent here? In that the buffer is 5 feet minimum, the clear view area is 10. So the theory is 5 on one side minimum, 5 on the other. We get the inverted triangles in that clear view area, and that's how we meet our 10. That was the intent. The code does allow you to, once you pass this area in the 5 feet, the 5 feet, and the 10, allows you to pave a driveway on that side of the house. So with that in mind, as you consider any sort of gravel parking areas, our professional recommendation is at this time to not necessarily change the clear view area. There are safety reasons as to why that was included in the current zoning code. With that said, yeah, here's one that doesn't meet the code. So we threw an example in here. So the other examples that we have is solely based on, if you can't have a 4-foot shrub in there or any sort of higher fencing, it doesn't make any sense for you to put a vehicle there and block the clear view. You're solely defeating the purpose of the clear view area if simply a car is allowed to be parked on that driveway. Does that make sense? This is why we felt that this regulation is important. We didn't put in all the other regulations. There's a lot more regarding driveways, but we wanted to include that. So I think that starts to wrap up, and that's why we have the conclusions and consideration. And the reason why we want to protect the 10 feet along the front, I'm going to go back to it. We want to protect it, so we change what material could end up on our storm drain, as based on the analysis provided by our city engineer. Obviously, the farther away you are from it, the more that you're protecting it. And that was our reasoning of why we have the spectrum of your menu items of where we could end up. If we hide it in the back, let's be serious here. It may not ever end up along that gutter, along that sidewalk. And that's why you could even legislate to say, heck, let's just do gravel right here, right at the front property line. We would highly advise you not to do that. But at the end of the day, you are the legislators and you decide as you see fit. Going back to the comment that Councilman Murray had regarding about working with the individual, it gets very complicated from my point of view, in that, did you know or did you not know? And I'm not accusing anybody, but the way, and we could go back to legal counsel here, the way that, at the end of the day, we have to draw a line in the sand, and we have to come up with a standard, and then we move on that standard that should be fair and should be equitable to all people and all sorts of development, depending upon that zoning district. We can speak about older homes and former codes and the evolution of the land use code and how we step into the legal non-conforming realm, which any property owner has that opportunity to prove to the planning department, to us, to say, hey, my driveway's been there forever, my driveway predates your zoning code, and we have to go through this evidence, fact-based type of exercise, and then we may say, oh, okay, you're good. Your driveway predates our code. You're not able to expand, but you are able to maintain. And we do get into that realm from time to time, but it gets very complicated when somebody just says, oh, I'm very sorry, I can't meet the code, I already installed it, how do I mitigate it? At that time, and Lloyd and Brad can have their opinion, I believe it's too late. And that's why we live the hard line at City Hall.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. I mean, when we're considering these kind of changes, we have to consider things that we know of in our neighborhoods that are being discussed right now, but we also have to consider citywide and the ramifications. I feel like, it makes sense to me when staff is talking about that it would be best if there's not direct access with gravel from the street, for not going into storm drains and not coming out onto the roadways. It also makes sense that we would want to protect curbs and our sidewalk so that they're not deteriorating. It also makes sense when I think about protecting parking, protecting landscaping, protecting driveways as three separate spaces. And at the same time, though, I do feel like we require in the winter for people to not park on the street. And for many of our residents, it's a real challenge to have areas to park in, to park on. And so I'd like to see if there's an appetite on the council for something like allowing gravel for parking to the side of the home, so that you would enter your driveway the same way that, that is allowed now, only through the main driveway, the primary driveway. You enter there, but then you are able to veer off and go off to the side into a gravel parking place if needed, that has the appropriate setbacks. I don't know if council would feel interested in pursuing an idea like this where gravel parking is allowed, but with certain parameters, where we still maintain the integrity of having a primary driveway that is constructed of concrete or asphalt. But anyway, I'm interested in ideas from the council and thoughts from the council on what your appetite is for any changes.
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd certainly be interested in exploring the possibility of allowing gravel parking areas. I think it's important. I think it was Lloyd who said that they prefer gravel not be used as a driveway, but just as a parking surface adjacent to the driveway. I think that's key. I think we've got to keep gravel away from the public area. I have wavered back and forth between the second to last and the last potential solution that staff presented, whether it be just a 10-foot separation from the public space or something more significant than that. But I definitely think we ought to take a look at it.
Thank you.
Mayor? may I?
Yes. Mhm.
Just to piggyback on Councilmember Higginson, I also am very interested in looking at the possibility of allowing gravel as a parking area material and really hopefully reduce the work of our city staff by adding clarity. I really was struck by something you said, Francisco, when you say, we live the hard line at the city. at City Hall. And it's true, the buck stops with you guys, and it's not, always fun, but I feel like this is an issue. I would say to my fellow council members, I feel like this is an issue that's begging for clarity. And we could go two ways. We could say, let's leave it as it is, or go for one of these other options. I am inclined toward the gravel parking within 10 feet behind the property line. I think that really addresses many of the things which are laid out in the staff report, if not all of them. I think we do allow gravel of a certain size in park strips, and I know this is different. And we want to be very clear, as was mentioned before, that we want to be very clear that this will not be using the same language or policy or theory behind the landscaping ordinance, but we do allow gravel of a certain size and conformity in the park strips, which are right next to the street, right next to the sidewalk. And I think when these things are laid out with clarity and with information, people really do try to be good actors. And I feel like with setbacks, the recommendation that we have the contiguous driveway that is either cement or asphalt, the clear view, the depth, we can look at the depth, barrier size and conformity and all those types of things that make this reasonable and make sense, but also allow this flexibility for our residents with clarity.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I comment that I agree that we need to look at this issue. I think it sounds like a good solution to some of the problems that people have with parking. But may I ask a question? What are the consequences for non-compliance? If there's a complaint and you research it out, and what happens? What is the consequence?
Sure. This is our standard code enforcement, which starts off by receiving an official complaint. We verify it. We check it for city codes. We start out with a 2-week turnaround time frame for them to fix it. If for whatever reason it doesn't get fixed in that, then we provide another formal 2-week time frame. At any given point, the applicant is able to request a remediation plan. It's more of a, hey, I'm out of the country. Hey, I can't do this. Hey, I need an extension. I need more time. We've always worked with people in that at the end of the day, our code enforcement program is set up for compliance and not to send them over to the city prosecutor, which is what would happen if they ignore us, if they don't return, they don't get back to us. After twice of trying to work with them, we send it over to the city prosecutor. At that point, then the city prosecutor, and these items are not their number one priority. It takes some time for them to schedule a hearing before the judge, which at that point, they could go ahead and assess some fees, assess a Class C misdemeanor, or any other sort of deal, quote unquote, that the prosecutor can address the same way. If you get a traffic violation, and if you do this, I'll lessen it. And it goes to that effect. And that's not the realm that I live in, prosecution. But we don't, my department, we do not have the ability to fine people. We simply work with them once, we work with them twice. And if they are not, if they're simply ignoring us, we send them over to prosecution.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question along those same lines? If we find that a property owner has had gravel from their, in this case, let's just say it's a legal zero-escaped park strip with gravel, but it has, we've had a storm, or they've had a sprinkler blowout, and it's washed into our city storm drain, and it's clogged the storm drain. What are our enforcement actions? I'm guessing at that point, it's not an enforcement for code enforcement, maybe an enforcement for engineering, but what happens then?
Well, our first priority is going to be restore the function of our storm drain system. As far as returning that material to the homeowner, it's probably unlikely that's going to happen because it's not going to be in the same state that it was. We don't have any options or resources to reimburse them for that. I mean, those are,
I wouldn't expect that we would reimburse, if their gravel has left their property through a storm or a sprinkler issue on their part and has caused damage on our end in clogging a storm drain, what are our recourses to say that their gravel has caused that issue?
well, it's a little, it depends. You know, it's kind of hard to prove in some cases who the gravel belongs to, because in some places in town, we have, you know, many opportunities for gravel to wash out of park strips during a storm. So I think in past cases where we've had those issues, well, we've told the resident that you've got to restore the park strip. The city's not going to come and repair that work unless it poses a danger to the public. You know, if it's a public safety issue, we will, but those kind of improvements would be the burden of the homeowner to restore. That's my opinion.
Mayor and council and Councilmember Bradshaw, maybe I can help you out here. We can file a small claims court and recover on behalf of the city. I have done this before. However, most of that is with like construction faults where somebody is doing construction and they leave either cement washouts or actual gravel in the street and it washes into our storm drain. That's pretty easy to do because we can easily pinpoint. In my mind, this will be very difficult to recover anything small claims wise, unless we can pinpoint exactly who the problem was and exactly the costs. And I think that will be difficult, especially in this situation, because like the city engineer said, it's not in the same state that it was. The gravel, I guess, could be, I mean, we don't know, but it could basically be the straw that breaks the back of our system if we have to go clean it out. There's already going to be dirt in there. There's already going to be gunk. There's already going to be gravel, or not gravel, fine sediment or sand. So it would be very difficult. Hypothetically, we could recover against a homeowner for our damages in cleaning it out, just like we could with any other private property that causes damage to city infrastructure. It'd be very difficult.
Thanks for that. Any other questions or thoughts on this from council? So it sounds to me like,
I'm happy
yeah,
to share my thoughts.
sure.
I'm not as excited about moving forward with changes. If we added clarity, I'd be happy to add clarity that we mean to similar paved surfaces. As the council knows, and as some residents know, I do a lot of dog walking around our city, and I've been very disappointed to see how many full gravel park strips have come, despite the zero escape ordinance, to have plants that would help anchor those things. The gravel does not stay in the park strips. It's always on the sidewalks. I spend a lot of time kicking the rocks back into the zero escaping. My husband and I happen to have a gravel pathway on the side of our house leading towards our back patio. I deeply regret that landscaping choice. The gravel also never stays in that pathway. It's always in the lawn. I think it would be problematic to introduce significant gravel parking into the front of the house where it's going to be subject to heavy traffic of cars that are going to kick it out into the sidewalk, out into the park, the roadways, and on potentially beyond the curb. I'm a little concerned too that we're addressing this because people decided not to look at the city code. Looking through city codes aren't anyone's most thrilling way to decide to do a landscaping project, but they're real and they exist. And if you've finished your basement, if you've decided to do an addition to your house, if you've needed to pour a new driveway, you know that you need to look at the codes and do that. And so I'm not quite sympathetic to someone who's decided to, rip out chunks of their landscaping in their yard and extend parking with a surface that is going to, cause problems for the city and for their neighbors. So I am less excited about moving forward. I may end up being in the minority here, but I think we should proceed with caution, because we will, in my opinion, increase the number of people who do not call and seek a permit or advice from our city staff, and we'll have problems with the Clearview area, people parking on the Clearview area, not landscaping the Clearview area, even in a xeriscape fashion, and we'll increase that problem for staff and the problems of these things coming in, because it will be very difficult to tell where their gravel ends and their xeriscaping begins.
So just to clarify, you're not in favor of making changes, but you are in favor of, you're happy to have it clarified
I'm
to
happy to
say,
insert one word into the existing code that would say, shall be paved with asphalt, concrete, or similar paved materials. Then it would be very clear that it must be a paving material, not a loose aggregate material.
okay,
Mayor,
thanks. Yes,
I want to agree with what Councilmember Bradshaw said. I think this is an uncomfortable way to address a nonconformity. I do, however, think the issue is well worth considering on its own merits, based on the benefit that it can provide both to the city and to residents in the future. Handling stormwater is a big deal for the city, and if this can help us to maintain the ability with our current capacity to handle additional stormwater in the future as folks pave additional areas, I think it's worth looking at. Thanks.
so help me understand, Councilman Higginson, you're saying that you would be in favor of considering a change?
Yes, I think it's uncomfortable that this has come to me, that this has come about because of some folks that didn't take the time to look at city code before they did something. And I don't want potential actions on this issue to be perceived as, well, we're just doing this to help those folks out. I don't know who those people are. I have no relationship with them. I have no ill will towards them either, except they didn't take the time to learn how they should proceed before they did. So but again, on just the merits of this possibility in and of itself, I think it's worth discussing and potentially proceeding.
So you're open to discussing the idea that there would be perhaps some gravel parking option that would be amenable to add to the code, or
Yes.
something different?
Yes.
Okay. What about other council members? What are your thoughts?
In line with what's been said from Councilman Washewis and Councilman Higginson, I think it'd be good to come up with what are the options, because we're not voting on it, right?
Right.
So it'd just be good to just see what are the wording options that the city can come back with, and then we can make a decision if that's the way we want to go.
And I think that's good, but it's good to give staff direction so that they know what might be interesting, what you might have an appetite for. I mean, Council Member Bradshaw was very clear with what she has an appetite for, but I'm curious for the rest of you, so that staff has direction, so that as they prepare to bring something back to us, they can know what we're interested in considering. I, for one, feel like I'd like to make the primary driveway a paved surface, but I'd like to consider the idea of having like an a gravel parking spot that is maybe to the side of the house beyond the driveway, so that there's more parking available. So
Well, on that 10-foot option, the last one that's there, that obviously takes the gravel off of the sidewalk and off of the road. So if any gravel does move, it's a nuisance to the homeowner. It's on their driveway,
Yeah,
right? And so I think that's where I lean on that 10-foot, is it takes it off the sidewalk and on the road. And I think of my neighborhood that doesn't have a sidewalk, that just takes it off the road.
so that's something that you'd like to consider, that you'd be open to
I'd be
considering.
open to it.
Okay, and,
Mayor,
yes.
sorry to interrupt again.
No.
I worry that the first two, of course, if I skip over the keep the code as is with no change and move to the next two options, consider gravel parking within the rear yard setback or consider gravel parking behind the main dwelling. In my mind, if the drive has to be concrete, both of those options still necessitate the pouring of significant concrete to get to the gravel parking pad, which to me defeats the purpose, at least most of the benefit of what this option can provide to the city. And also reduces the, maybe eliminates the money saved by the resident in being able to park on gravel.
That makes sense. So you're saying that you feel like there's one or more that makes more sense in your mind?
To me, the last two make sense, either behind the front yard setback or at least 10 feet from the property line, from the public right of way.
So you're interested in having a discussion where we would consider those two?
Correct. Thank you.
Any other thoughts from any other council members?
Can you remind me, what is the measurement of that front yard setback? What is that?
It's typically 25 feet.
Mayor, I have just something I'd like to respond to, if I may. I understand that there are people who are interested in this, who are here tonight, and also people who have reached out about this independently who are not here tonight. And it's true, these code provisions do reach out and impact our residents. So often we hear about these things when they have intimately touched a resident's life. And at that point, when I heard of a recent potential code violation, in speaking with our planning director, what I learned is that there are multiple code enforcement complaints every year about this very thing, about gravel parking areas. And I thought, if we're getting this multiple times a year, we don't have clear enough language. And I think that is what is the key here. Our language is not clear enough. I don't think changing the language and adding clarity, and if we were to consider one of these options that allows gravel parking area in the front of the house, I don't think that increases the number who call. I think the number who call and check out these things or proactively look at the code probably remains about the same. But those who do, they will have more information, and that is a good thing, and will be clear of what we allow or don't allow.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. So because we're short on time, just wanted to hear from other council members about if you feel like staff should pursue the final two bullet points, to consider gravel parking behind the front yard setback and consider gravel parking 10 feet behind the front property line. Is that where we want to direct staff to make some options or for us to consider?
Mayor?
Getting a head nod, yes?
Yes, I'm interested in that as well.
Okay. Did you have other questions?
Looking at the first two, the parking within the rear yard or the main dwelling, I also know that there are issues with hotspots in the city. We need to maintain grass, we need to maintain shade, things like that. I think that that could be a concern with those first two. So yes, I'm interested.
Okay, so it looks like at least three of you four, including Councilman Higginson, are interested in considering the last two options. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
I have one quick clarifying
Okay,
question.
one quick question.
We're going to go to the exhibit. So the 25 is a line from side property line to side property line. That's pretty easy to maneuver. The 10-foot, you're saying that if you end up supporting that, hypothetically, that you could have the first 10 feet have to be concrete or asphalt, and then right here, right where that area is, it could be gravel.
No, you'd have to, I think the conversation is to the
Over to
side
the
of
side.
the
So I'm
driveway.
gonna, that's why I have this triangle, rectangle here.
Yeah.
You're saying, I'm moving the whole thing.
The
You're
driveway
saying,
still is defined as driveway concrete, but then to the side of the driveway.
you're saying this area, you would be
Yes.
okay if this yellow area was gravel parking.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. You're not saying in front of the house, the driveway leading to the garage. You're saying on the side only.
Yes.
As
Gotcha.
a homeowner, I don't know if you'd want to ruin your curb appeal by putting gravel in front of your house.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all in agreement. I mean, we all are on the same page.
We're not all in agreement, but
We're not,
four of you might be.
yes, thank you. So we're all on the same page about what you may be bringing back to us to consider. So, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your input and discussion on this. And so what this means is that we will be considering code change in a future meeting where we will take action. Tonight, there was no final decisions made. So thank you, everyone, for your participation in that discussion. We'll just have a brief 2-minute break, and we'll come back for our regular city council meeting starting at 7.